Second part. We are considering with you yoga of reading aloud, yoga of writing. So then, these are the moments with yoga reading aloud. First of all, there is one more thing that is also very common, as it is sometimes called dyslexia now, namely problems to read words in a certain sequence. Look, we have a letter as if in the West, which is from left to right. We write from left to right and read. There are cultures, countries where, on the contrary, the letter is in the other direction. And so on, and so on. So, there are very well features of our mind, sometimes very different, and a large number of children. That's especially observed in children, when it is very difficult for a child to keep attention in this vector from left to right and jump. Jump. He has attention. In other words, this is a more natural way of perceiving the universe. Here you go into the forest, you don't scan the lines like that, right? You look there, where the banana is, where the danger is there, and so on, so on. Here and here too, when reading aloud, children often have big problems, especially, and adults, which does not allow them, well, to learn to read aloud. And it doesn't matter in any language, this is when this attention jumps. And this also requires some effort. And in order to reveal this, again, here is to keep track of this sequence, as if to get used to it, to train your mind, to actually do things in general that are not so natural. Somebody's this. Bring him to his senses. Father. Just like that. Yes, that means. Oh yeah, a situation. The next thing that is. So what did we say about dyslexia? The next thing we had.
About the elimination of the language barrier.
Yes, reading aloud works perfectly to eliminate the language barrier. That is, or when you are, say, learning another language, you are going to, say, go to another country, or already in another country. You can live there all your life and never learn the language. I know many sad examples. People left there who went to America, who went where? Well, I didn't learn the language. Why? Here there is no circle of communication, as it were. And it seems like it's not necessary, it seems like everything is fine. And so if you want to learn a language, force yourself to read aloud, well, a foreign language. That is, to read books aloud as much as possible. The more you read English books out loud, the faster, in fact, you will overcome the language barrier. And begin to say that sometimes, you know, people seem to understand English, but it's hard to go into conversation. It's hard for them to say something, answer, and so on, yes. That is, here it is extremely yoga, reading aloud. Reading aloud helps. So then, the next moment, it happens and observe for yourself, very strange effects of our mind, that is, the games of our mind. Some thought is spinning on the subconscious. We read a sentence, and we involuntarily substitute some words in this sentence from the context we are thinking about. This is very often the case. What if we have? We are thinking about one thing. We seem to have such a substitution going on in our head. In general, strictly speaking, these are mind games, Maya games, which, in general, fool us. Imagine if you read something, substitute it in your head, fool yourself, substitute words, then the meaning does not reach you. Well, it's no wonder that you don't succeed in life afterwards. In other words, all these flaws then manifest themselves in a critical way when it is necessary to make decisions. And you somehow do not show it that way. And there are people with whom you say something to them there. Yes, yes, they agree. Well, no, I didn't. Why? Yes, I'm right here. Yes, I am. Yes, so, yes. And in general, they can't even answer why they did it. It seemed to them that it was somehow more harmonious or more vital. This is the feeling, you know, of these illusions somehow. But if some other word or action, it's kind of disharmonious. Some people begin to sum up whole abstruse theories under this, especially in yoga. Especially I'm dating here, that you're not doing something. Oh, I don't feel harmonious in this world. I'm going to wait until it's all by itself. That's it. You'll never wait. Because working on yourself, doing work is work. This is when you force yourself and sometimes break your knee. That is, such asceticism. So, this manifests itself first of all in reading aloud, when the listener already hears, like, why are you talking nonsense? Because when you change the word about yourself, you didn't notice it yourself, but it sharply cuts the ear. If you give it to someone else to listen to or read it to someone else. Therefore, well, from a purely practical point of view, you do this. You first record yourself, and then you listen to yourself. So that's why I talk about it so much. Because God, how much? It's all about me. It's my hooves in my mouth. I didn't know how to read. They wanted to transfer me to an auxiliary school in my childhood from dyslexia. When the study of some heavy subjects began, I read to myself. I substitute concepts. I can't. I mean, I'm talking about myself right now. And it took me a very long time to somehow work with it. Already when everyone there waved their hand and said that everything was already gone. Well, usually it always happens if you don't show good results there right away. As a rule, everyone waves at you. I remember how hard it is. I remember everything when the first voice recorders became portable, 30 years ago or something like that. I was already there. In general, not this one. Oh no, 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 I'm sorry. The very first thing, I actually recorded on a tape recorder for exams at school. Then there were already common such cassette recorders. What was I doing? If I need to learn something, I dictated it first, and then listened to myself. And when you listen to yourself several times, first of all, you are surprised to see how mind games replace words and concepts. Especially when there is still a comparison with the text. As you say, some of the words there are parasites, as you are simply not interested in listening. There are people who are interesting to listen to, there are people who mumble. This does not mean that they are stupid or bad there, but there is a problem. So, the identification of mine, the identification of such self-deception, happens very well when reading aloud. Therefore, as, let's say, in the training of teachers, regardless of how old you are, what your background is, you have to voice some text out loud. Voice it out loud, and only then we are really sure that everything is okay. In general, there are examples from, for example, let's say, from the army. Here in the Soviet army, as well as in other armies of the world, if a soldier is given an important order, what follows as a rule? Repeat the order. Because you give an order, a soldier nods there or says that he understands, but in fact in his brain, he replaces one concept with another, one idea with another, or just, as they say, in a state of insanity. Not articulate, right? Here, and here you make him talk, he gets tense. Even if he automatically says what you said to him, it automatically turns in his head, and then, in any case, he does not immediately forget it. Where did all this come from in the army? The experience is sad. You know, the army has a charter. The charter is written in blood. The army is the thing where a mistake, in general, the price of a mistake is a person's life. What are soldiers forced to do in the army? Memorize the charter. And this is considered something bad. In fact, this is a vital thing, because in a state of stress, in a state of battle, in a state of uncertainty, and so on, and so on. The only thing that works is that you memorized or once one section. He said it out loud, and so on, and so on. Otherwise, throwing, doubts, thinking, completing begin, where it is necessary to do clearly, unambiguously, and quickly. That's why there are a lot of positive aspects from this yoga. That is, how would it be, on the one hand, it can be considered a mantra yoga in general, or a kind of such a mantra yoga. But in order not to be confused, additional names are given, well, in order to specifically understand what is required of a person. Well, in particular, we have this yoga Vaikhari at Karen. We go further, related, of course, to the same yoga. That is, if you read something out loud, it means that it must be written somewhere. So someone has to write it somehow. Now the last, maybe 5 years, it's generally some kind of tragedy has gone, because people have stopped being able to write. At school. Well, yes, why? Because there are computers everywhere. Okay, computers. If there was at least a keyboard before, you could use every finger and, in general, do something. Now, in general, only 2 fingers work on these mobile phones. That is, ask. I'm coming. People of the older generation are terrified now. There the student went to enter the university. He had to fill out a questionnaire. He was given a piece of paper with a pen. This put him in a stupor. He can't use it. In other words, it was just shock and stupor. How to write something? Where? And where do you have this keyboard? Yes. So, on the one hand, everything seems to be fast. Everything seems to be fine. If you type on the keyboard, no matter what kind of handwriting you have, they can always make out and read it. But there is another ability of ours, namely a rigid ligament between the hands and the brain, between our intellectual abilities and the fingers. Now, I do not know if you know or not, but if a person gets this or that injury, let's say he goes to the hospital, and, as a rule, doctors are divided into 2 parts.
Вот я не знаю, знаете вы или нет, но если человек получает ту или иную травму, скажем, он идет в больницу, и, как правило, врачи делятся на 2 части.
Those doctors, well, something physical there, a cut there, some kind of wound or something. Here is everything that concerns the whole body, and everything that concerns the hands. These same ones, what do we call it? Hands. If you have any problem with your hand, some areas of medicine are engaged in this, while others simply do not climb there. This. Well, ask around, it's very interesting. Then further, you know, in this. Not in the Middle Ages, when our artists painted. It was believed that an artist paints a picture, well, it's difficult to draw a portrait of a person. A certain amount of money was taken for this. The most difficult thing is what to portray. The face, and the second is the hands. Therefore, sometimes you see that some figure is depicted, his face is depicted, and he is holding something with his hand. Or there is some kind of gesture with his hand. Yes, there is almost a double payment. That is, for the
изображение
image of the
лица и
face
за
and for the
изображение
image of the
руки.
hand. In
То
other
есть,
words,
хотим
whether
мы
we
того
want
или
it
не
or not,
хотим,
the
но
hands have played
кисти
and
рук
continue to play a gigantic
в
role
нашей
in our
эволюционной
evolutionary history.
истории играли и продолжают играть гигантскую роль.
And
И
all of
все
our
наши
abilities, including intellectual
способности, в том
ones,
числе и
are tightly tied to the
интеллектуальные,
hands.
жестко
Therefore,
завязаны
all
на
kinds of
кисти рук.
massages, all kinds of fine, as it is
Поэтому
called,
всякого рода
motor skills,
массажи, всякого рода тонкая, как это называется, моторика рук,
Ru extremely strongly promotes the
чрезвычайно
development of the
сильно
mind,
способствует
especially in
развитию
children.
разума, особенно у детей.
And
И
so this
поэтому
is, you
вот
know,
это
some
вот,
small
знаете,
little
какие-то
manipulations with your
мелкие
hands when you ask the
мелкие
children to do,
манипуляции
in fact,
руками,
you.
когда вы просите детей сделать, на самом деле вы
This
это
has a very
очень
serious effect
серьезно
on all their
влияет
cognitive abilities.
на все их познавательные способности, косвенно,
Indirectly, of
безусловно.
course. But
Но
the
вся
whole
история
history of mankind
человечества
is
это
about us
мы
changing
меняем
the
мир
world
вокруг
around us.
себя.
How do we
Чем мы
change the
меняем
world
мир
around
вокруг
us?
себя?
Hands.
Руками.
The more
Чем
complex the
сложнее
mechanism,
механизм,
the
тем
more
вот
scrupulously
надо
something has to be
более
done.
скрупулезно что-либо сделать.
And
А
in
чтобы
order to
более
do something more
скрупулезно что-либо
scrupulously, you
сделать,
need to
надо
keep your mind on it in a
удерживать
meditative state.
свое сознание на этом в медитативном состоянии.
Why?
Почему? Потому что,
Because, well, as if naturally
ну,
we
как бы
see a monkey.
естественно мы обезьянку
You've seen it, haven't you?
видели, да?
To go to the circus and not to the circus where? Where should I
Куда надо
go?
сходить?
This very day.
В
Menagerie,
зверинец, да, в
yes, to the
зоопарк.
zoo.
Посмотрите за
Look after the
обезьянкой.
monkeys. They're like
Они как
Quicksilver.
прыг,
Jump,
прыг,
jump,
прыг,
jump,
прыг,
jump,
прыг,
jump,
прыг.
jump.
А тут вот
And
надо,
here it is necessary. And
и
it
это
requires a
требует
gigantic
гигантских
effort
усилий,
again from
опять же,
inside your
внутри
mind.
вашего разума.
Pay
Обратите
attention,
внимание, у вас
your
сразу
breathing slows
дыхание
down
замедляется.
immediately.
Вы
You
что-то
do
мелкое
something small,
делаете,
your
у вас
breathing slows
дыхание
down,
замедляется,
your
у
mind
вас
starts working differently.
разум по-другому начинает работать. Вы
You start
начинаете
to churn.
потеть,
It means
потеть,
sweating,
пыхтеть,
puffing,
значит,
in order to
чтобы
keep
вот
concentration
концентрацию
here.
удерживать.
From
От
every
каждого
little movement of your
незначительного
fingers, well,
движения ваших
everything
пальцев
depends.
ну, зависит все.
Now
Теперь
look at how
посмотрите,
they
как
write
учат
in a
в
modern
современной
school.
школе.
It was
Это
also
тоже
a
была для
tragedy
меня
for me.
трагедия. Почему?
Why?
Потому что я еще, когда
Because when I
маленький был,
was
я еще был
little,
левша.
I was still
А тогда было
left-handed, and
указание
then there was an instruction from
сверху,
above that everyone
что
should be
всех
retrained on the
переучивать на
right
правую
hand.
руку.
It
Это
was
еще было
also a legacy of the
наследие
Stalin era,
сталинской
because
эпохи,
all
потому
rifles
что
are
все
made under
винтовки
right-handed.
делаются под правшей.
And her.
И, а
The country
стране
needs
нужны
soldiers.
солдаты.
Why?
Почему? Потому
Because
что,
here. Yes, that
вот,
is, they will
да,
not
то
be
есть не
under you.
будут под тебя. И
And
вот
here
такое
is an
указание.
indication.
Совершенно
Absolutely cruel,
жестокое, свирепое.
ferocious.
Левша,
Left-handed,
не
not
левша, всех
left-handed,
под
all
правую
under the
руку,
right
потому
hand,
что из-
because of. Well, in
в общем,
general,
всё
everything
сделано
is
под
done under the
правую
right
руку,
hand,
да?
right. It's
Понятно?
clear
Ты
that
в
you don't
детстве и
have this
так
motor
этой
skills as a
моторикой не
child.
обладаешь.
Then
Потом
you
у тебя
have some
какая-то
kind of dominant
доминирующая
hand.
рука, ты её
You change it
меняешь
to,
на, ну,
well,
более,
more.
ну,
Well, the
проблемы
problems
страшные.
are terrible. It is
Понятно,
clear
как,
there,
как
as in
вот в
some
Японии,
Japan,
когда злые
when
языки
evil
убеждают
tongues
там
claim
детей
that
и
children are forced to be
заставляют
able to
уметь
write
писать
with two
двумя
hands there.
руками.
Therefore,
Поэтому
yoga of
йога
writing,
письма,
regardless of whether you are a child or
вне
already a big person,
зависимости,
but especially for children.
ребенок вы или
Intellectual
уже
abilities can
большой
directly
человек, но
depend on
особенно
your
для
left and
детей,
right hand skills.
интеллектуальные способности могут напрямую зависеть от вашего владения левой и правой рукой.
And
И
it
надо
is
какое-то
necessary to
время
devote some
уделять
time
для
in
того,
order to do some
чтобы
subtle
какие-то
manipulations.
тонкие манипуляции делать.
It is clear
Понятно,
that the
что
letter,
письмо, ну,
well,
раньше
there
в
were no
печатных машинах
typewriters
не было
before,
принтеров,
there were
не
no
было,
printers,
и любая
and any
книга
book
была
was a
большая
rarity.
редкость. Если
If
хочешь,
you
чтобы у
want
тебя
to have
была
a great
большая яркость,
rarity,
либо сам
either copy it
переписывай, либо
yourself
переписчика
or hire
нанимай.
a copyist. It's
Я
clear that
нанимал
hiring a copyist is
переписчика
an expensive pleasure, so it wasn't so
дорогое
long ago
удовольствие, поэтому
that students
еще
were
совсем
required to
недавно
write
от
notes
студентов,
at
что в
universities.
университетах требовалось? Конспекты писать.
There is one textbook for the
Там
whole
один
university.
учебник на
There
весь
are 5
университет, там 5
textbooks for the
учебников
whole
на весь
university.
университет.
I
Написал
wrote
в
in my
конспектах,
notes,
сдал
I passed
экзамен,
the
не
exam,
написал,
I
не
didn't
сдал.
write, I didn't pass.
Сейчас-то мы
Now we have
расслабились
relaxed a little,
немного, то
that
есть
is, he is completely open on his mobile phone
хоть на
and
мобильном
read,
телефоне
yes.
открывай и читай,
And
да,
before
а
there
раньше
was
не
no
было
such
этого,
thing,
просто не
it
было
just wasn't
физически.
physically there.
Поэтому
Therefore,
очень
it is very
важно
important to
следить,
make
чтобы
sure
дети как
that
можно
children write as
больше
much as
писали,
possible
причем
and write
писали
with
как
both
одной,
one
так и
and the
другой
other
рукой.
hand.
Если
If
же
you
вы
suddenly
вдруг
see that
видите,
their
что
letters are clumsy, They do not
Вот
scale a
буквы
piece
у
of
них
paper.
корявые, они не масштабируют листик бумажки.
That
То есть
is, he
начинает
begins to
писать
write a
слово, а
word,
оно не
but it does not
помещается.
fit.
Это
It's not a
проблема не
problem with
буквы,
the
это
arm,
проблема с
it's a
головой.
problem with the head. And
И
how
как
exactly the
точно
same
так же,
as
как и
everything,
все,
it
это
needs to be honed,
требуется, ну, как
well,
бы
as it were.
оттачивать.
Therefore,
Поэтому
this yoga of writing,
вот эта
it is also present in many
йога
yoga instructions.
письма, она также присутствует во многих йоговских указаниях.
In
В
particular,
частности,
adjacent to
смежная с
mantra yoga,
мантра-йогой, скажем,
let's say japa yoga.
йога. Как
What
она
was it called when
называлась,
they write?
когда
Here you are not only repeating the mantra, but
пишут
only immediately
кодовую
write it
мантру? Не
down on
только
a piece of
повторяете, но
paper.
только и сразу же записываете на листике бумаги.
Likhita japa.
Джапа, да.
Yes. That
То
is
есть
a very powerful
очень
tool for practice.
мощнейший инструмент для практики. Если
If you want,
хотите,
you took a
вы
tent,
взяли палатку,
retired somewhere in the
удалились
forest
куда-нибудь в
in
лес
order
для
to
того,
practice
чтобы
yoga.
практиковать йогу.
Be sure
Обязательно
to get a
листик
piece of
бумажки
paper
с
with a
ручкой,
pen or birch bark
ну
somewhere,
или
yes,
бересты где-нибудь это раздобудьте, да?
and
И
some part of
какую-то
the
часть
practice,
практики
you must write something by
обязательно
hand.
что-то пишите рукой. Э,
And this is
И
a
это
necessary component to bring the mind out of the
составляющая, чтобы
bestial state.
вывести из скотского состояния разум.
I can
Я могу
also
тоже
share an
примером
example of
таким
this.
поделиться, когда-то
Once upon a
совсем давно,
time, including me,
в том числе
to
и
teach
я,
yoga to
чтобы
people in the
обучать
department
йоге
along the
людей,
so-called
водил
trails.
по так называемым тропам.
Well,
Ну, это,
this
грубо
is,
говоря,
roughly
такой, как это
speaking,
сказать,
such a, how should
туристический
I say
поход,
it,
где вы
a tourist trip where you
больше
stay
3
in
дней
one
на одном
place for
месте
more
не
than 3 days,
останавливаетесь, и у
and do
вас
not stop, and you
переходы.
have transitions. Practice in nature,
На
as a
природе,
rule,
как
is
правило,
completely removed.
совершенно удалении.
And here
И
is a
вот
completely
совершенно
typical
типичная
thing.
вещь. Там на
There a
какой-то
person
день
comes
человек из
from the city
города
for some
приезжает,
day,
природа,
nature,
кислород, всё
oxygen,
необычное,
everything unusual, physical activity.
физическая
Then lunch
нагрузка,
and what is
потом
called
обед
tamas.
и то, что называется тамас.
That
То есть
is,
все буквально в
everyone is
скотском
literally in a bestial
состоянии,
state,
полусонными,
half asleep, half
полусоображающими.
imagining. They really are.
Они уж не,
They
они уже
already
с
hardly
трудом
understand
понимают,
why
зачем
they
они в
went on
этот
this
поход
trip to
пошли
study
йогу
yoga.
изучать. А
Well,
вот
here's where the
состояние
animal's condition is
животного,
complete, right?
полнейшее, да?
And the
И
only thing that
единственное,
helped
что
was these two
помогало,
yogs.
это вот эти две йоги.
Yoga
Йога
reading
чтения
aloud,
вслух и
yoga
йога
writing.
письма.
So,
Так, все
everyone
едят,
eats,
но вы не
but you
просто
don't just eat
едите
food.
еду,
One
один
stands
стоит
and
и
reads.
читает.
You have
Вы
eaten,
покушали,
you are not just lying
не
around,
просто
so it means
валяетесь,
that you
значит,
are
в
in a semi-fainting state,
полуобморочном
in a
состоянии, в
semi-oblivion, right?
полузабытие, да?
You
Вы
listen to the
слушаете
text
текст и по
and take
очереди
turns reading it.
читаете.
So,
Так,
you
вы
are
не
not
просто
just
так,
there,
значит,
so after
после
that,
этого, вы
you
сейчас
have now done a
известную
well-known
йоговскую
yoga
практику
practice.
сделали,
You have drawn a yatra
нарисовали
and written
ятру и
mantras.
написали мантры.
So,
Значит,
anywhere,
где
even with a
угодно,
stick in
хоть
the
в
ground,
облачной земле,
everyone.
каждый.
You
Кстати,
know,
там еще
there
есть
is
такая
still such a
красивая
beautiful
практика, ты
practice there.
садишься,
You sit down,
ну,
well, clear the
расчищаешь
ground, and begin to
землю и
draw the
вокруг
yantra
себя
around you,
начинаешь рисовать
with the
янтру,
appropriate mantras, as if you were in the center of the
мантрами, как
universe
если бы
and
ты,
meditating.
значит, был в центре вселенной и медитировал. Да? То есть
Yes,
вот ты
that
как
is,
бы
here you are,
практику
as it were,
визуализации
transferring the practice
переносишь
of
на
visualization to geometric
геометрические
shapes around
фигуры
you,
вокруг
plus,
себя,
while
плюс
pronouncing,
еще
you write down mantras in
произнося
all directions
записываешь
there,
мантры
the
по
cardinal
всем
directions.
направлениям,
This
сторонам
greatly
света.
contributes to the
Это
concentration of
очень
consciousness.
сильно способствует концентрации сознания.
Here
Вот
are
такие
some
совершенно
absolutely
простые
simple
примеры.
examples. Household
Бытовые,
here,
вот,
here, you know,
знаете, вот из
here
того,
from
что
what turned up at
подвернулось
hand.
под рукой.
And
Но вот
that's the
только
only
это я
thing I
помню
remember
в
in
этих
these walks along the
хождениях по
trails.
тропам, ну,
Well,
когда
when
действительно
nature
там
really was there,
природа,
nature, first of all,
из,
brought out of the
во-первых, из
bestial
скотского
state, and
состояния
secondly,
выводила.
contributed to a very
Во-вторых,
strong progress in yoga.
способствовала очень сильному прогрессу в йоге.
Therefore,
Поэтому
these two
вот эти
directions
две,
are extremely practical.
два вот этих направления чрезвычайно практичны.
Then
Потом
on.
дальше.
If
Если
you
вы
are going to
собрались
do
делать
some yoga
какую-то
practice
практику в
according to
йоге,
this or that
согласно
treatise,
тому или иному трактату,
what does a
что
modern
делает
person do?
современный человек?
He
Скачивает
downloads a
из
treatise from the
интернета
internet,
трактат, загружает
uploads it
себе
to
там
his
в
reader
читалку
or
или
phone there, and then
в
it means that
телефон,
he
и
starts
потом,
reading
значит, на лоне
in the
природы
bosom of
начинает
nature,
читать
trying to
и
reproduce it.
пытаться воспроизвести.
This
Это
is inefficient.
неэффективно.
It is effective
Эффективно,
if you
если вы
rewrite the
от
treatise
руки
by hand
сами
yourself in advance
заранее
And then, at the moment when you start practicing, you begin to read it and do something according to it, exactly according to the treatise that you wrote with your own hand. It would seem a trifle, but what difference does it make, right? Friends, from these invisible little ingredients, either you have a fantastic yoga practice going on, or you don't. But since we are all modern people, we begin to neglect these little things, and then we do not get the effect. Because it's not about the little things, it's about your mind. And your mind needs to be somehow concentrated, held. We must somehow, well, command them. And these little things, there, like a horse, it's a bridle, a little thing, yes, but you can control a horse. That's exactly how our mind works. Sometimes what you write with your hand, the fact that you correlate the movement of your fingers with thoughts about what you write about, only about what you draw, your breathing is different, and your thoughts are different, and everything is different. Therefore, if you go to study for a yoga teacher, we strongly require that you take notes. A synopsis is more than just some knowledge that you have written down. It's a kind of powerful tool. Well, you know how there's a magic wand or something, right? Or a magic yantra. That is, her just looked at her, and everything around her began to change in a different way. So the effect of these yogas is exactly the same. Now further in the sequel. I like the story, it's well known. In Tibet, it was the most widespread. This is again the yoga of reading aloud, so there she even acquired such, such professional ones. Professional continuation, it is considered that if one or another sacred text is read aloud in a particular place, then this place becomes sacred. That is, roughly speaking, there are two types of places of power or sacred places. The first ones are natural, the second ones are those that were created, as it were, by the person who practiced there. In other words, it is known that if you constantly practice yoga in one place or another, then this place acquires all the favorable qualities for all living beings who may even accidentally come there. That's why, by hook or by crook, wandering sadhus were lured to the village by Indian. Yes, that's right. There is a wandering yogi walking along the road there. Well, everything goes. No, you come to us, stay with us there for at least a couple of days. Is that why? Because he's going to practice there and sort of. They are such very practical people, and after that, look, and the harvest seems to be better, and that's the most. Well, less conflicts. In other words, there is such a component. Well, and here is the continuation of this component. There were people who came to this or that place in this way, and began to read aloud one or the other, this or that text. It was believed that if you read the text aloud in this place, it becomes sacred. And if several times, then it's generally super duper sacred there. And many invited people who had speed reading to their homes. Because, well, you invite him there so that he reads the same text as many times as possible in your house. And then you have well-being in the house. It was such an established practice that there were some people who, for money, of course, for a reward, went back and forth, and earned their living by reading these texts. Well, who prevents you from going down this path? A similar situation is that if certain signs are drawn there in one place or another, yes, these are all favorable signs. Runes like this one in the west and so on, yes, then supposedly the place becomes favorable. Here again are echoes of the same thing. But who prevents you from taking and writing by hand the same yoga abstract, there with everyone, then with the left, then with the right hand with the text, with the yantras, and then you have him lying in a prominent place. Yes, his gaze even touches him, and you immediately feel so much better. And this effect is described. This effect is very well described. And generally speaking, if you know, in ancient Vedic times, as far as we can judge, temples like this, you know, there were not built of glass and concrete, or there were some pyramids there. The temples were lit by a sacred fire. This is where he sat down, so this is where he sat down. This is a sacred place, right? And who bothers you with these small, seemingly insignificant tools that, well, it would seem, well, my God, but what? Well, I lit it like a fire, I didn't light it. Well, I read aloud or paused. Well, I drew something by hand and did not draw. Well, will the universe change from this? Yes, it will change. Why? Because, first of all, it is a tool for influencing your mind. The rationale, by the way, from the point of view of the Yoga Sutta, was unambiguously danced. As soon as your mind concentrates, then, roughly speaking, you go into a superstate. And first of all, you can learn everything yourself. Secondly, your impact on the world around you is very, very big. You seem to permeate the place where, therefore, you have entered this state above. Therefore, unfortunately, a Western person is very overly rational, self-confident, considers it beneath his dignity to repeat something aloud, memorize, or, God forbid, it means to draw by hand when there is a mobile phone. And you can, you know, with this finger. And as a result, well, how to get it? And then everything goes not as fun as it could go. In any case, if you go to train a teacher in open yoga, this will be required of you. This will be demanded of you, because everything, if it is not demanded, will have very bad results. So let me remind you, OpenYogaClass.com, free internet yoga courses, including this course, will be there. Then AI Temp University. It's all connected with science and mathematics, modern life. This is a joint project, in general. There it will also be possible to somehow join it in one form or another, I hope. Are we pressing the buttons?